Hi, and welcome to the Giving Project for Children's chapter book read aloud with E.B. White's Charlotte's Web. We are really enjoying this book, and we just got to the point where Avery Arable fell and broke the goose's rotten egg. Well, Templeton's goose's rotten egg, and it was quite a sting, but it was enough to save Charlotte's life. I wonder if Avery Arable will still try to catch Charlotte, or if that broken egg was enough to foil that plan. So today we're going to read chapter 11, The Miracle. We're going to focus on our questioning strategy, and I have a question. What is the miracle? Do you think it has something to do with saving Wilbur's life? I don't know. But let's read ahead. That's the only way we're going to get answers to our questions. Remember to stop and pause and ask questions as you go. I'll continue to do the same. The miracle. The next day was foggy, and everything on the farm was dripping wet. The grass looked like a magic carpet. The asparagus patch looked like a silver forest. On foggy mornings, Charlotte's Web was truly a thing of beauty. And this morning, each thin strand was decorated with dozens of tiny beads of water. The web glistened in the light and made patterns of loveliness and mystery like a delicate veil. Wow, that's some really beautiful descriptive language again. I hope you're making a movie in your mind and visualizing about what that web really looks like. Even Lurvy, who wasn't particularly interested in beautiful things, noticed the web when he came to the pig's breakfast. He noticed how clearly it showed up, and he noted how big and carefully it was built. And then he took another look and saw something that made him set the pail down. There, in the center of the web, neatly woven in block letters, was a message, and it said, "Some pig." The web said "some pig"? Do you think that's the miracle? How did it get there? Let's read on to find more. Lurvy felt weak. He brushed his hand across his eyes and stared harder at Charlotte's web. "Some pig. I'm seeing things," he whispered, and he dropped to his knees and uttered a short prayer. Then, forgetting all about Wilbur's breakfast, he walked back to the house and called Mr. Zuckerman. "I think you better come down to the pig pen," he said. "What's the trouble?" asked Mr. Zuckerman. "Anything wrong with that pig?" "Not exactly," said Lurvy. "Come see for yourself." And the two men walked silently down to Wilbur's yard. Lurvy pointed out the spider web. Do you see what I see?" he asked. And Zuckerman stared at the writing on the web and then murmured the words, "Some pig." And then he looked at Lurvy, and then they both began to tremble. Charlotte, sleepy after her night's extension, smiled as she watched, and Wilbur came and stood directly under the web. "So big," muttered Lurvy in a low voice. "Some pig," said Zuckerman. They stared and stared for a long time at Wilbur, then at Charlotte, then at Wilbur. "You don't suppose that spider," said Zuckerman. But he shook his head and he didn't finish his sentence. Instead, he walked solemnly back up to the house and spoke to his wife. "Edith, something's happened," he said in a weak voice. And he went to the living room and sat down, and Mrs. Zuckerman followed. "I've got something to tell you, Edith. You better sit down." And Mrs. Zuckerman sank into her chair. She looked pale and frightened. "Edith," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, I think you best be told that we have a very unusual pig." What I always wonder about this book as I read it is, why are they thinking that the pig is unusual? Do they think that the pig made the web? I would think that Charlotte is the unusual one. But that's just my questioning. A look of complete bewilderment came over Mrs. Zuckerman's face. What's bewilderment? What kind of a look could come over Mrs. Zuckerman's face? That might be bewilderment. "Homer Zuckerman, what in the world are you talking about?" she said. "This is a very serious thing, Edith," he replied. "Our pig is completely out of the ordinary." "What's so unusual about that pig?" asked Mrs. Zuckerman, who was beginning to recover from her scare. "Well, I really don't know yet," said Mr. Zuckerman. But we've received a sign, Edith. A mysterious sign, a miracle that's happened on this farm. There's a large spider web in the doorway of that barn cellar right over the pig pen. And when Lurvy went out to feed the pig this morning, he noticed a web. Because it was foggy, and you know how a spider web looks very distinct in a fog. And right sprang in the middle of that web, there were the words, "Some pig." The words were woven right into the web, and they were actually part of the web, Edith. I know, because I've been down there and I've seen it, and it says, "Some pig." Just as clear can be. There's no mistaking about it. A miracle has happened, and a sign has occurred here on Earth, right in our farm. We have no extraordinary pig. Well, said Mrs. Zuckerman, it seems to me you're a little off. It seems to me that we have no ordinary spider. Yeah, thank goodness somebody realizes that. Oh no, it's the pig that's unusual. It says so right there in the middle of the web. Maybe so, but just the same, I intend to have a look at that spider. It's a common gray spider, said Mr. Zuckerman. They got up and they together walked down to Wilbur's barn. You see it, Edith? It's just a common gray spider. Wilbur was pleased to receive so much attention. And Lurvy was still standing there, and Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman, all three of them, stood for over an hour reading the words on that web over and over and watching Wilbur. Reading and watching, reading and watching. Charlotte was delighted by the way her trick was working. She sat without moving a muscle and listened to the conversation of the people. When a small fly blundered into the web just beyond the word pig, Charlotte dropped quickly down, rolled up the fly, and carried it out of the way. After a while, the fog lifted and the web dried off and the words didn't show up just so plainly, but the Zuckermans and Lurvy walked back into the house. And just before they left the pig pen, Mr. Zuckerman took one last look at Wilbur. You know, he said in an important voice, I've thought all along that pig of ours was an extra good one. He is a solid pig. He is as solid as they come. You notice how solid he is around the shoulder? Sure I do, said Lurvy. I've always noticed that pig. He's quite a pig. I'm questioning. Have they always thought that, or are they just saying it now because there's some sign? What do you think? He's long and he's quite smooth. That's right, said Lurvy. He's as smooth as they come. He is some pig. Sounds like Charlotte's trick really has worked. When Mr. Zuckerman got back to the house, he took off his work clothes and put on his best suit. Then he got in his car and he drove to the minister's house. I wonder why he's going to the minister's house. He stayed for about an hour and explained to the minister that a miracle had happened on the farm. So far, said Zuckerman, only 4 people on the earth know about this miracle. Myself, my wife Edith, my hired man Lurvy, and you. Don't tell anyone, said the minister. We don't know what it means yet, but perhaps if I give thought to it, I can explain it in my sermon next Sunday. There can be no doubt that you have a most unusual pig. I intend to speak about it in my sermon and point out the fact that this community has been visited by a wondrous animal. By the way, does that pig have a name? Why, yes, said Mr. Zuckerman. My little niece calls him Wilbur. She's a rather cute child, full of notions. But she raised the pig on the bottle, and I bought it from her when he was a month old. He shook hands with the minister and he left. Secrets are hard to keep. And long before Sunday came, the news had spread all over the county, and everyone knew that a sign had appeared in the spider's web on Zuckerman's place. Everybody knew that the Zuckermans had a wondrous pig. People came from miles around to look at Wilbur and to read the words of Charlotte's Web, and the Zuckermans' driveway was full of cars and trucks from morning till night. Fords and Chevys and Buicks and GMCs and Plymouths and Studebakers and Packards and DeSotas with Gyromatic transmissions and Oldsmobiles with rocket engines and Jeep station wagons and Pontiacs. The news of the wonderful pig spread clear up into the hills. And farmers came rattling down in buggies and buckboards to stand hour after hour in Wilbur's pen admiring the miraculous animal. All said they'd never seen such a pig before in their lives. And when Fern told her mother that Avery had tried to hit the Zuckerman spider with a stick, Mrs. Arable was so shocked that she sent Avery to bed without supper as a punishment. In the days that followed, Mr. Zuckerman was so busy entertaining visitors that he neglected his farm work. He wore his good clothes all the time now, got right into them when he got up in the morning. Mrs. Zuckerman prepared a special meal for Wilbur, and Lurvy shaved and got a haircut, and his principal farm duty began to feed the pig. Mr. Zuckerman ordered Lurvy to increase Wilbur's feedings from 3 meals a day to 4 meals a day. And the Zuckermans were so busy with visitors that they forgot about other things on the farm. The blackberries got ripe, and Mrs. Zuckerman failed to put up any blackberry jam. The corn needed hoeing, and Lurvy didn't have time to hoe it. On Sunday, the church was so full as the minister explained the miracle. He said that the words on the spiderweb proved that human beings must always be on the watch for the coming of wonders. All in all, the Zuckerman's pig peg was the center of attraction. Fern was happy, for she felt that Charlotte's trick was working and that Wilbur's life would be saved. But she found that the barn was not nearly as pleasant to many people. She liked it much better when she could be alone with all of her friends, the animals. So that was chapter 11, the miracle. This was quite a miracle, and the miracle was what Charlotte had written, some pig in the web. This was quite an exciting chapter, and it's the beginning of a really exciting part of the book. We're about halfway through at this point, and the next chapter is entitled The Meeting. So many questions as I move forward and I make predictions and think about what's going to happen. I also was really able to visualize what that spiderweb looked in my head by the way that E.B. White described it. So make sure that you're continuing to do all 4 of the strategies that we've practiced. 5-finger retells, predictions as we think ahead, visualizing what you see, and questioning as you read. Thank you so much for sharing our love of reading together. Till next time.